Hi, I'm Hannah Jones and welcome to this week's MASTS Cast, the weekly online update about what's been happening in the MASTS community. This week's edition contains two interviews, one with Professor Mike Heath from the University of Strathclyde and the other with Dr. Marie Porter from SAMS. This week's MASTS webinar was hugely successful. We had over 90 people attend Professor David Patterson's webinar titled Decommissioning and the Ecology of Oil Rigs. If you weren't able to attend, don't worry, the entire session and the live Q&A was recorded and has been uploaded to our YouTube page. The link for that is shown below. Next week's talker is Dr. Tavis Potts from the University of Aberdeen with the seminar title Participatory Mapping for Natural Capital. If you would like to attend, please use the registration link that's included in the video description below. Up next, I talk to Professor Mike Heath, where we talk about his recent published report with Dr. Robin Cook titled Risks to the North Sea Fish Stocks and Wildlife if Post-Brexit Fishery Negotiations Fail to Reach an Agreement on Quotas and Access to UK Waters.
Hi Mike, thank you for agreeing to talk to us and feature in our MASTS Cast video. So this is all about your latest report that you've had published just last month. And in this report, you discuss a potential ecological consequences that you've modelled and looked at if a scenario where all the EU negotiating parties set their own ideal fishing quotas and if the industry actually went over the sustainable catch limit, and this all happening in the North Sea. So could you just tell us what your models were looking at and what those key findings of the report were, please?
Sure, yeah. So, the background to this is that the UK and the EU are in the process of trying to negotiate a mechanism for agreeing quotas. But, the trouble is that, the UK on one side says, we want more fish, and the EU say, well, you can't have them. So the UK is in the position of saying, well, you can't fish in our waters then, and the EU says, well, you can't have a trade deal. So we seem to be in a sort of an impasse, and the risk is that we get to December and they're unable to agree. So one side or both sides act unilaterally to set their own quotas, which in total exceed the total allowable catch. Mm-hmm. So what we were trying to do was use models to predict what the consequences of such action would be.
Yeah.
And we used two different sorts of models. On the one hand, Robin Cook recreated the single species stock projection models that are used by ICs, and we use those to forecast out into the future the consequences of exceeding the TAC for a set of species, and particularly herring, saithe, cod, haddock and plaice. And on the other hand, we used a food web model, an ecosystem model for the North Sea, to indicate what the consequences for the whole of the ecosystem would be for those increased levels of fishing.
Okay, so you had those two models going on at the same time after this potential scenario was happening. And what did you find from this? What were those predicted actions that might happen in our seas?
Well, the two main species that stand out as being at risk in the single species models are herring and cod. So in the case of herring, there's a very big mismatch between the amount of fish that are caught in the UK territorial waters of the North Sea and the amount that's allocated to the UK. So the EU vessels take an awful lot more herring out of the UK waters than UK boats do. So that's the main species in the North Sea where the UK appears to have a claim for an increase in the quota share. And in that case, we're looking at if the two sides act unilaterally, in other words, the EU say, well, we're taking what we've always taken, and the UK says we're taking what we're entitled to take because it's in our waters, then that means that the TAC would be breached or exceeded by 70%. Mm-hmm. And that pushes herring into a state where collapse is extremely likely. The same happens for cod, but then cod is closer to the edge of collapse already anyway, so the potential for exceeding the TAC is much smaller for cod, but it's sufficient to push cod into a poor state. So the ecosystem consequences of all of that are a reduction in food for top predators. In particular for seabirds and cetaceans in the North Sea, we see negative consequences for those groups as a result of these TACs being breached.
So for those who want to find out more, the reports are readily available online. The URLs are just below this video and they're free, they're open access, aren't they?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So there's a full technical report, which is 100 pages or more, and then a shorter summary report, which makes a slightly easier reading than the full technical report.
Thank you very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
As mentioned in my chat with Mike, all the links below for the reports and his piece in the conversation are in the bottom of this video. There is also a link to a recent publication by Paul Fernandez and Niall Fallon titled "Fish Distributions Reveal Discrepancies Between Zonal Attachment and Quota Allocations." This is an open source article, and if you want to check it out, please look below the video. In addition, MASTS would also like to congratulate the successful recipients of the Marine Biogeochemistry Forum Small Grants Round. They include Seb Henich from the University of Edinburgh, Claire Johnson from SAMS, Hannah Lee from Heriot-Watt University, and Jack Sheehy from Heriot-Watt University as well. Congratulations to all of them. Next up is my chat with Dr. Marie Porter from SAMS. In our conversation, we chat about the hidden water that she found on a recent expedition in the Arctic.
Thank you, Marie, for talking to me today about your recent work that's been released. Scientists uncover hidden water of the Arctic Ocean. Can you just give me a brief description about what this work was and what it's kind of unveiled from using your gliders in the Arctic Ocean?
Yeah, so we were very lucky and had a lovely cruise up to the Arctic in July 2017, where we had very good weather, so we were able to put some of our robots out in the water. And this was genuinely just to test that we could actually do it, because we'd not really put them out before. And they're slow, they move at about 10 centimeters a second, and they're buoyancy driven, so they don't have big motors or anything to drive them around. So we didn't know if we were going to encounter loads of currents that were going to knock them off course or anything. So this was a practice go at deploying them for a big mission that we had coming up the following year. So we only had them out in the water for 2 weeks, and our gliders run completely autonomously for 2 weeks. Well, not completely autonomously. People back in Southampton were having to run them and make sure they worked properly. But whilst we were on the ship, we didn't touch them for 2 weeks. And the gliders do a nice transect through the water. And as I say, this was just a test mission, check we could do it, check everything worked. And logistically it was fine. But then when we got the data back, we realized that there was actually quite a lot in it, and even just this really short mission had pulled up things that we'd just not seen before, because the Arctic, the water up there is just so unexplored at the moment. And when people go out, it's on ships, so you get a station every 50 kilometers or something, but we're getting a profile every 1 kilometer with the gliders, and they're getting temperature, salinity, they're looking at chlorophyll, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you're able to collect a whole wealth of data from this.
Yeah, really high resolution, just so you can see all these extra things that you couldn't do.
And then you came across these eddies in the water. So for those who don't know, what is one of those? So and what did it show you?
An eddy is just sort of almost a patch of water in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So we were quite near a front, which is north of the front. You've got the Arctic water, so it's cold and it's fresh. And south of the front, you've got Atlantic water, which is warm and salty. And that's come up from the Atlantic. The Arctic waters come down and they meet. And when they meet, you can get a meander sets up, or all sorts of different instabilities where you might get a bit of water that gets pinched off and gets sent into the wrong patch. So what we saw was a little patch of Arctic water that was hanging out in the Atlantic sector.
Yeah.
Pinched off and come south.
Yeah, you say little. To me, it sounds quite large. It's 30 kilometers across.
It's little in terms of if you had a ship going out and collecting a profile every 50 kilometers, you might get one in the middle of it, and you wouldn't know you'd sampled it.
Yeah, I guess with your 1 kilometer resolution, you are able to get quite a lot of data about that.
Yeah, so the gliders let us see it.
And I read that these aren't normally observed because the surface water is usually warmer due to, I guess, the environment. But actually with the glider 200 meters below, it unveiled this whole series of new information that allowed you to even spot the eddy in the first place.
Yeah, so they're normally seen through satellites. That's how we can detect eddies, because obviously the ship resolution is really coarse, but satellites can see everything. But they can only see the very top few millimeters of the water. So this eddy looked like it had actually been sort of around for about 5 days or so, so it wasn't brand new. And as I said, it was really good weather. It was very sunny, it was very warm for the Arctic. And so it looks like it started to heat up at the surface again. And so there wasn't a temperature signal between the rest of the water and where the eddy was.
Okay.
So the top 10 meters, 20 meters of the water column were the same as everywhere else. So the satellites just aren't going to see it. They're not going to.
Okay, so it was totally hidden, yeah.
Yeah.
And so with knowing that actually these eddies occur under the surface and can be undetected, what can this mean? Like, what do you hope to kind of maybe investigate with this information now that you know how to find them almost?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. It's not even knowing how to find them, it's just knowing that they're there.
Yeah, actually. I mean, it was, just a nice coincidence really that you came across it.
Yeah, we just had a lovely data set. I think the biggest thing in this is that the Arctic water tends to be really depleted of nutrients, and the Atlantic sector has loads of nutrients. It's very nutrient rich, and it's refreshed through the year, whereas the Arctic water has its spring bloom and then is depleted of nutrients for the rest of the year. And our understanding of primary productivity of these areas, so this is the Barents Sea, so it's sort of the Norwegian bit of the Arctic. Our understanding of primary productivity there is based on the fact that there's not these patches of really low productivity water with no nutrients in them. So it may be that our understanding of these processes, of what plants are living there and then what animals are able to feed on them, is maybe quite overestimated in the south. And then if there's similar ones going north, maybe we're really underestimating it further north as well.
Yeah, so actually there's this whole cycle of nutrients that haven't really been considered before.
Yeah.
Ah, excellent. That's great. And the paper is uploaded online, I believe.
Yeah, it's uploaded online. It's in Geophysical Research Letters, and it's open access, so everyone can read it.
That's great. That's what we love to hear, open access journals. And thank you very much for your time. That was really interesting, and I hope you find plenty more eddies in the future.
Thanks, Anna. That was great.
As mentioned in our chat, the link for the report is found below in the video description, as well as her email address and her Twitter handle if you want to follow her for more updates. So that's everything for this week's MASTS cast. If you would like to present a webinar or have something featured in this video, please let us know with our usual email address or send us a message on Twitter. That just leaves me to say, have a great weekend.